Now I'd like to introduce to you one of the giants of the MENA region. He is currently the executive chairman of Orascom Investment Holding, among many other titles. He has had a long and inspiring career shaping Egypt, the MENA region, and the rest of the world in many industries, and also one of my favorite Twitter accounts. We feel humbled to have him with us here today. Please join me in welcoming Mr. El-Bash Mohandis Naguib Sawiris.
So first I have to say that I love Beirut. So I actually don't just love Beirut. I'm very biased for Lebanon. So I love all Lebanese. I mean, and I'm and you need to know that. And I think because this is also a venue of architecture, I have to say that before we go into my speech. And I have to tell you that I never write my speeches. So whatever you hear, if you think in the end it doesn't go together, it's okay. Beirut did something nice when they rebuilt Beirut in Solidaire. I always compare Beirut to Dubai. So what the Lebanese did, because they have a lot of mixed cultures, and I always say they're more refined than many other parts of the Arab world, they went back to their own culture. So when they rebuilt downtown Beirut, the Solidaire, they took their old architecture and just improved on the, let's say, call it infrastructure. So the windows close when they used to not close in the old times because they were done shaky. They used new materials, but they look like the old materials. So they kept the spirit. So when you walk down Solidaire, you feel what we mean about our culture. When you're in Dubai, you think you are either in Silicon City or Crystal City. So Crystal City is a city next to Washington, D.C., for you guys who know Washington. It's called Crystal City because it's all glass, aluminum, and you feel the cold in Dubai when you walk, and you don't feel that this is really our culture. So just, again, even in the technology today, when we do, that's going to be your challenge, I mean. And you're very lucky because our region gives a lot of challenges. So we are living in a mess, the mess, whether it's political or it's even infrastructure. So let's first start with the political, and I will start from the world because the world also is a mess today. And why is the world a mess? Because we're living in a time where each big leader wants to have his own empire. So there's the Russian empire, orchestrated by Mr. Putin. There is the Chinese empire by the chairman of the so-called Communist Party of China. And we have another empire in our regions, the Erdogan in Turkey, and it goes on, and everybody wants to end up with, and you have actually, funny enough, in the United States, today, another emperor. So, so for the first time, even in America, where you think there is like the Senate and the Congress, we have a leader now that he also wants to be an emperor, and he is acting like an emperor. So this is going to be a very risky time for all of you, and for all of us, and for your careers too. If I divert now to the Middle East, to our MENA region, it's a big mess, you know. I mean, what choices do you have today if you wanted to go and work there? It's either you go to Morocco or Egypt or the Gulf, but you can't go to Libya, you can't go to Iraq, you can't go to Syria, you can't go many other areas, and Sudan, you cannot, and Algeria now you can't, because the whole area is in turmoil. Anyhow, that's not just the bad news. There's a good news to it too, because for your careers, where else can you go and rebuild countries and not just cities, you know? So the options for you and the possibilities for you are immense. You know, if you think of Syria and what rebuilding effort has to be done there, and it has to be done in billions of dollars, and it has to be done also adhering to, so we don't want to lose Damascus. We don't want to lose the old town of Damascus. We don't want to lose the culture, the nice architecture of the past, because, I mean, I'm a big fan of old architecture. It is beautiful, you know, when you compare it to our modern stuff and so on. So the challenge is going to be for people like you is how can you bring the know-how you have? How can you use the new technologies to rebuild these vast countries that have been destroyed by war, whether it's Syria, Libya, Iraq, but keeping the feel of the culture and the essence of it, you know. And you cannot just go and say, okay, we're going to do it this way or this way. You need to think, okay, we have all these new technologies. What really fits? What will fit? And how can we help, you know? I mean, I like the comment about Cairo, and I share your view because actually our president, I hope there's no microphones here. He said when asked why he's building a new capital and what do we do with the slums and the squatters that we have in Cairo, he said there is no hope to fix that, so the only way to do it is to go and build something new. Okay, but you know, it's not going to disappear. The slums. I mean, I have the nicest tower in Cairo, but they keep on, some socialist, communist guys, I'm a capitalist person, of course, they send pictures with my tower and the slums in the back, and they say, look at the slums, and this guy has this tower. I always write back to them, I said, I built the tower, not the slums. So, I mean, I'm not responsible for the slums. But these slums need you, and these squatters need you. You need to come up with the ideas and how to make these people's lives better and in a very innovative and easy way, you know, because if the leaders have lost hope, you can't lose hope, because otherwise they'll keep on putting this picture of my tower and the squatters, you know, and I feel bad, but, you know, just to crack a joke, because, you know, Egyptians, we like to joke a lot. So one day I thought, okay, this is not nice. You have the money and the means. Go back and these squatters buy that out like they did in Solidaire and build something nice. So the fact is these squatters build their houses of tin and wood. So you buy someone out. He takes his tin down. And what does he do after he gets the money? He takes the tin and the wood and goes to the next plot and puts it back. So you pay him twice, you know. So it doesn't end, you know. So without the law, and this is in reality, without a great leader like Rafiq Hariri, God bless his soul, issuing a law forcing everybody in downtown Beirut to be part of a bigger picture, he would have not been ever been able to build Solidaire. So what we need is also the laws that will empower people like you to go back and do, because, I mean, I feel sorry, you know, I'm always asked should we go back, should we stay here? There's pros and cons. If you are willing to, if you're a fighter and you don't mind the frustrations of our communities and our countries and what politics bring, you should go back. Why? Because it needs you more. But that's not enough, you know, you need to look for your future, and you need to try and be as rich as I am, for example. And you can't do that by just goodwill. But there is an advantage for you down there is how many people are like you? Very few. Not many people had the opportunity you had with the education. So that means when you go back to your countries, you will have less competition. You will be a star amongst many others who did not get this quality of education that you got here. So you will have an advantage, and therefore your chances of success are higher. So by doing your country good and trying to help there, you will also get something personal that, you know, the chances of you succeeding is higher, because there's lots of intelligent people like you here, well educated, but not in our countries. And that should be a reason also to go back. And for me, I feel like your challenge should be, how can we, with the education we had, come up with brilliant ideas that combine our knowledge of our culture and circumstances and can really eradicate these squatters and these slums and turn them into beautiful, nice cities like Solidaire. I mean, you know, when Rafiq Hariri was alive, you know, the Lebanese are very critical, you know, so whatever you do, you will be criticized. So that's just the nature of things. So some people would say that Rafiq Hariri, look, he came with 1 billion and he ended up with 4 billion. I mean, and so he was put into the situation that if he didn't invest his money in Lebanon, they would call him, they would say, look, he doesn't even trust his own country, it's risky, he didn't put the money. If he puts the money, they expect him to lose money. So if he makes money, they call him, look, he made a lot of money, as if he can't make both. I am sure Rafiq Hariri, God bless his soul, was a patriot. And what he did for Beirut till now is evident. You end up in the airport, you see one of the best airports of the world, 10 minutes to downtown, not 1 hour or 2 hours like in London, for example. And the city he built, Solidaire, is just a masterpiece of beauty. You walk around the city, you get the same old feeling, and everybody's very happy, except the guy who has the hotel near the sea. I think it's called, I forgot the name, but he has a big sign, anti-Solidaire sign. So I think that you can do it, you know. You guys have got, you're sitting in one of the best universities of the world, you've got the best education. Come up with what are the brilliant ideas that can go in, rebuild all these slums, rebuild these countries that have been devastated by war, whether it's in Libya or Iraq or Algeria. There is immense work. I mean, I have a meeting with the dean later on, and I'm going to tell him there's a golden opportunity. The amount of work that we need to do after these horrible wars that we've been in is immense. I don't think that anybody else can. And then if we rebuild it, we have to rebuild it for the future, you know. Many of the stuff which has been ruined or broken down should have been broken down anyhow, but many of it is irreplaceable, like all the archaeological sites that these crazy ISIS people destroyed. I mean, this we cannot bring back, you know, but you can build, at least with the knowledge you have, the new cities and make people's life for centuries to come better, you know. I don't want to make a very long speech, you know. Usually I prefer actually to give you the stand and ask if you have any questions and ask me any questions you have. I prefer that usually than making a big lecture, you know. So if I'm welcome to any other questions, you know, because usually I can give you a small synopsis of my trip during my career, how I went to when I went, but my daughter is here and she always thinks I'm trying to brag, so it makes it difficult for me to say that. So, but I'll leave questions to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to have a mic going around for anyone to ask questions.
So we'll let you choose.
So I will start, so one guy, one girl, one guy, one girl. So I'll start with you.
Okay, hello, Mr. Sawiris. My name is Yusuf. I'm also Egyptian. I had a question for you. You mentioned how us, as having the golden opportunity to be educated in the West, and especially in one of the best universities. What about the people in Egypt or in the Middle East, in the MENA region, who maybe are as bright as the students here, or even brighter, but don't necessarily get the opportunity? How can we, I guess, go along the path of actually cultivating these brains and these minds and these ideas? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people in the MENA region who have great capabilities, but they're not getting that opportunity. So what's your take on, I guess, what you say about that? Thank you.
To be honest, the problem is the leadership we have. We have never been, I mean, even a great leader like Rafael Hariri, they killed him in the end, you see, because we have never had the leadership in our countries is most of these countries were had kings, king after king, or generals after generals, you know. And never did we have an MIT graduate as the president of any of these countries, you know. So without a leadership that understands the value of education and the importance of it, and starts to prioritize education instead of building new cities or building new roads or building like that, how can you do that? Because, you know, it's very expensive. Even here in America, I mean, if you want to study, it's not like given. Because, I mean, it's a $70,000 a year or something like that every year, and you have to have this kind of money to come and study or get. But there are student loans, there are donations, but when I mean, what we need in our part of the world is a leadership that understands the importance of education. So, rightly, like you say, they can give this opportunity to everybody. But you cannot go and say, I'm going to sacrifice my career because I want to educate everybody, you know, and then you go and work on university. It's going to be a difficult. Without the right leadership, unfortunately, I don't see a big chance, yani. So a girl now. Okay, a woman. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rawa Shakaki, and I want to follow up on this point that you just made. Earlier, you invited them to come to the Middle East to rebuild. But the fact is they can't rebuild with the leaderships that we have. So what are people like you in positions of power doing to change the leadership or change the landscape? Create opportunity.
You know, you're going to get me into trouble, more trouble. But the joke on the street is that Naguib doesn't need any helping to getting into trouble. He's always, he manages to get himself in trouble all the time. You know, I have been very active in my own country. There is something very bad about my character, is that I actually fight these evil leaders wherever they are, and I get myself and my family into trouble most of the time. So I hope it doesn't get. You know, recently I criticized a leader from the region, you know, and hell broke up because nobody has dared to criticize him. And then I caused my brother, my two brothers, to lose businesses because they had business in the country where I criticized the leader and so on. I mean, I think it's a duty of everybody. But the good news, there's some good news. If you look at what happened now in Algeria and in Sudan, because everybody thought that the Arab Spring is done with. And many people, the old generation in my country, they believed the Arab Spring was a disaster, you know, because it brought up a mess and uncertainty and no security, and it brought up the extreme religious Muslim Brotherhood to the regime, you know. But the fact remains, without democracy, without freedom, without equality, without a social sense, you will never achieve stability. And therefore we have no choice but, you know, and all these leaders that think they can become dictators and suppress their people, sooner or later they'll be toppled. If Bouteflika in Algeria wasn't crazy enough to want to rule from the grave, he's dead and wants to rule a 5th term. If he was intelligent, he would come up in a speech and say, my people, thank you very much. I'm very old. I've done my best for you. It's time for me to go. And he would stay at home. But because of corruption and some and because they become senile in the end, they think they will never die. You know, they don't leave. So look what happens to him. And Bashir, the same thing. If he would have seen that people, okay, 30 years, enough is enough, and we have said, okay, I'm leaving, he would not be in jail right now. You know, so. The good news is, just to answer your question, it's happening. People are not anymore going to just stay. It takes some time. We pay a price, 5 years, 10 years, but in the end, this one leader will be toppled sooner or later. And then it's a chance for this generation to come. But they should not wait. They should come back because they will be part of the people who will change, you know. I didn't do anything in my life alone. I remember my first demonstration in Cairo University, I was 19. Everybody was scared. I put a piece of newspaper on the floor and I sat. And we started the biggest ever demonstration in the history of Egypt, 100,000 people. But I was the first to put the newspaper on the floor because everybody else was scared. You know, so, I mean, it shows you that you can, but I couldn't have done it alone. If not, this next guy came and said, are you here for the demonstration? I said, yes, have some guys sit down. And then we went into a big, and Sadat called it the biggest, it was the biggest. It was during Sadat time, you know. So, okay, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Mazen Al-Khatib. I'm originally Palestinian. I was raised in Jordan. My question to you goes towards basically, it goes along with the other questions somewhat. So we do face a lot of uncertainty and a lot of continuous change in policies in the MENA region when it comes to the governmental intervention. So what is your take, or what are the methods that you think are appropriate in order to have, or in order to prosper in businesses and new projects and changes in the MENA region with having minimal impact of these uncertainties to these projects? So basically, a lot of projects that I witnessed in Jordan get stopped or don't continue because of changing policies or uncertainties in the governmental interventions. So what would you recommend that we do in order to face these new policies and uncertainties and keep on going?
Unfortunately, this is not just in Jordan. This is everywhere. I mean, the bureaucracy, the municipalities, it's mostly corrupt or uneducated, and they're not attending to you. You would speak in Chinese to them if you go and tell them what the new rules are of architecture or urban organization and so on. So the only advice I give is start with the private sector. Go to the private sector. The private sector usually will listen and understands and has better taste and has better knowledge. And they can start to showcase. Like if there's a big developer in Jordan, you know, go to him, start with them, and they can do a showcase. They can go to the desert. I mean, Jordan is full of deserts, and start something to show what ideal situation it is. Of course, it has to have a commercial aspect to be financed, but that's my advice. Is just don't waste your time talking to civil servants. So no more girls. So, sir, there in the back.
CD Balxis from Morocco. I like your phrase quite a bit, turn ghettos to heavens. That's always well said. These days, a lot of people talking about recycling. The question is, what do you think about recycling rubbles, all that cement that's already there?
No, I think, again, the question is going to be a cost. You know, you need a capitalists or developers or people, they will always look at the cost. If you think that they have a conscious, environmental conscious, yes, they do, but they'll first look at the money. They look at the cost, you know. So if recycling can come up with a more economic methodology, and I think it can, because, you know, bricks today, for example, are costing a lot, and there is a lot of laws prohibiting doing bricks, for example, in Egypt from the agriculture land and so on. So recycling has to be economically and in competition with normal usage of things, you know. That's my answer.
Thank you. I am Pedro Ortiz. I have many hats. I would like to follow the previous thread about leadership. No? What do you think about that sentence that many people have said, for instance, Truman, no? That we have the leaders we deserve? And then my question is, don't you think that what we lack is not leaders but collective intelligence?
No, we don't have the leaders we deserve. We actually have the leaders we don't deserve, you know. Because, I mean, most of us are not happy with their leaders, you know. But, you know, the people who are not happy with their leaders are now in jail. In many of the Arab countries, you know, they are in jail. You know, you go in Saudi Arabia and say, I don't like MBS. Show me what will happen to you, or in Egypt or anywhere. So, but the good news is you should not go alone. In the end, we have proven, and young people have proven in Egypt, they proved in 25 January that they can go and change, you know. So we need to understand that we have to be brave, we have to have faith, and we have to be collective, like you say. We have to be all together, so they can't kill all of us, but they can always hang one or put one in jail, you know, but they can't put all the population in. So it needs some courage and faith, you know, and we can then change that, you know. But I don't think we have the leaders we deserve, because we didn't even have a choice to choose our leaders. How can we say that these are the ones we deserve, you know? I mean, sure.
I will use my position of power and ask the question myself.
Okay.
So following up on that, so you said that we have the leaders we do not deserve, but oftentimes we cannot work around that. So should we go about dethroning them and then working towards rebuilding slums or cities and stuff like that, or should we try to work within the system? What are your thoughts on like change from within or change from outside?
I think the sane, I mean, some people usually think I'm crazy. Part of this is true. So I'm not going to give you the crazy advice. I'm going to give you the sane advice. The advice is to go in parallel. Go inside, do the maximum you can do within the system, but always believe that you should change the system if it's a dead end, if it has no meaning, you know. And I try to do that myself all the time, because, you know, if and some of it is also of fear of being stopped at the first base without even getting to do anything, because, you know, if you get, let's say you start by trying to change the system, they put you in jail and your life is done, then you haven't achieved anything, you know. So I mean, it's not just to be brave and wise and know when to attack and when to stand and when to wait, you know. But don't be like people who just never attack and always stand and don't take a position, you know.
I like this approach of diversifying sort of.
Yes, because I mean, you want to be practical in the end, you know. Idealists usually end up in jail or they commit suicide.
Yeah, thank you for this very conversational nature. We still have time for around 3 more questions, so.
My name is Arif Al-Tamimi from Kisarai, from Qatar actually. One challenge that you have in Cairo is the randomized building, عشوائيات. Have you thought or have you came up with an innovative way to fix it while retaining the heritages, as you mentioned in your speech, with taking those residents to like a better and safer place? Thank you.
You know, the problem is, again, the leadership. I mean, I have lots of ideas, and I know I can do it. And I have just these ashwayat or slums behind my building immediately, you know. The problem is you need a law that will force them. You need the government. You need the governor. And if I would tell you about the qualifications of our governors, you would fall, you would laugh. I mean, usually it's a general of a police general, is not even an ambassador who's been around the world or seen, or an architect or a civil engineer, for example, that understands, you know. So it's always a person, and then he comes, and in order not even to condemn him too much, he comes on a structure that is rotten, you know, full of bureaucracy, full of corruption, you know. I mean, my license for my tower was delayed 18 months to 20 months, just because I would not pay the bribe of the municipality guy. He said, this guy thinks he's well connected, he'll never get the license, even if he thinks he's well connected, you know. So how can I implement my ideas and my things when I have to deal with a governor that knows nothing and is not willing and doesn't have the law to force people that they should evacuate, you know? And the minute I try to do that, then the newspaper said, look at this capitalist trying to throw people out of their land. And it's not their land, it's my land, and their squatters on my land, and I can't even take them out, you know? So unfortunately, the reality is not nice. I mean, I can't change the realities, you know. If I could, I would, you know.
Hi, my name is Natasha Abaza. So we've been talking a little bit about, how do we rebuild our cities, and we've been talking about, these slums and different kinds of development. And I was wondering, we want to fix our cities, sure, we want to go back, but how do we do that without harming the people that are already there, like you just talked about, right? We have, I wasn't. Like we have, sure, we have some gentrification happening, and it's always going hand in hand with development. So how do we rebuild but stay authentic and care about our people at the same time?
Okay. The first rule is don't move them from where they've been for years. So the mistake many developers do, they think they'll just issue a check to them and they can go anywhere. No, they prefer to stay in this area where they are. So it's not about removing the people. It's about building an architecture that looks nice, is decent, is human. These people live in shacks, so it's all wood or iron, صفيح, and dirty, and no roads and no electricity, and the electricity is all coming, like in Beirut sometimes also, with all from tons of areas and so on. So what we would do is very easily is go back, build the buildings in the back, because they are squatted like that and they live in small, and build the buildings in a very human-wise, in a very modern way that look with a nice architecture, and give everybody a unit equal to the space that he was occupying, and then utilize the rest of the land value and bring some other stuff to it. So it's doable. It's not that you need to remove them or change their life, And some of them actually prefer to get a check and go somewhere else because they have other life. But you have to do it in a way that you give them the options. They want to stay, they get the same area, but in a decent component. If they want to leave and get the check, they get the check. It's doable. This is not the problem. The problem is you cannot start this without a law that forces everybody to adhere to a certain regime, and this has not been issued. You could, if the governor was a strong person, knowing what he'll do, and he will explain to people that this is what it's going to be in the end, he could. But as an individual, private person, I don't have the means to enforce that. The minute I move, I become the bad guy that wants to throw people out.
Hi, my name is Iyad, Egyptian Canadian. So, how can we drive an acceptance of the other in highly polarized and electrified political environments like we have in Egypt? I was very blessed and lucky to actually be in Egypt during the Egyptian Revolution, and I witnessed people from across the spectrum coming together for one thing. Right now, Egypt is as polarized as ever. How can we begin to have conversations where people don't even want to look at each other?
Well, in the United States, you can. So that's the good news. So my advice, have the conversation here. Because if you have it in Egypt, I'm not sure we can, you know. But on Twitter, for example, you know, which is still one of the last liberal or democratic setups available in Egypt, we are having these discussions, you know. The problem is that there is now attempts to fake the conversations by having these electronic paid people that are doing opinions that are not really yours, that are trying to push a certain opinion, and it's not coming from each individual, you know. But it's happening. I think social media, and with all the attack on social media today, we need to be very careful that we don't disturb this biggest evolution in democracy called social media. You know, I mean, of course, it needs to be regulated because of so-called fake news or slandering or trying to implement. The problem with every invention is that if there is bad people that can utilize the invention into something catastrophic, like artificial intelligence, for example. Imagine when terrorists are going to start working with artificial intelligence, what they'll be capable to do, you know. So my point is, it exists, it's on social media, it should remain, and you should have the feel of who's genuine and who's not, because otherwise you can be influenced by all this trashy, let's say, orchestrated opinions. Yeah. Did I answer right, or it's not? Okay.
So Sawiris, I wanted to ask you about the success of the African tech movement and your role in that. The world is fascinated with the success of that, and also with what is now being described as African futurism. Black Panther, the film, was an example of that. Last month I saw a concert of a Malian singer, Fatoumata Diawara, who's the epitome of this kind of futurist cultural enterprise, mixing, she plays electric guitar like Jimi Hendrix. She sings like Kulthum and dances like there's no tomorrow. Yeah. A fascinating combination of technology, culture, vibrancy, that seems to be the cultural outcome of this African tech movement. What's the secret of its success, and how can we bring it to the Arab world?
First, I want to thank you because, you know, I actually, as I said, I don't prepare my speech usually, but I told myself I have to tell people here about Africa, because right now I spend half of my traveling into Africa. And I believe that Africa is the next gold mine. The possibilities there are still very virgin. It's still very open. There is nothing, so you can start to do everything. They have a lot of mineral wealth. They have a lot of wealth that is not being utilized. But mostly, to come to your point, they have a lot of talent. I mean, I have seen so many intelligent people, innovative people in music, in filmmaking, in fashion. And my advice is also some of you should think of going there. And I mean, you Lebanese, you are pioneer. Every African country you go, there's a Lebanese guy. He has the hotel, the restaurant, and and it's because of the saying, you know, that, you know, Egyptians, they want to stay in Egypt. They don't like to travel. But Lebanese, they have this slogan that says, "Matrah ma terza, ilza," which means wherever you're going to make the money, stick there. Don't go looking around. So Africa has a lot of immense, you know. And to tell you, the fact is that I think this ingenuity and the intelligence you talked about is coming from nature, because, I mean, now with the technology, I fame myself for bringing the mobile device in Africa and in the Middle East. I think I was one of the few. I had 400 million people in the end taking my device. And the device has connected people in Africa to knowledge. You know, it has done a revolution. It has revolutionized, you know, the internet has revolutionized knowledge. So knowledge is not now a function of just people sitting here. You just go into the internet, and if you are a knowledge-seeking person, you will get it. So this is what made the change in Africa, that now it's affordable. You know, they have a phone, they can go into the internet, you know, and that is the reason that you are starting to see that, because of the connection to the technology. I mean, when I used to sell my company and my roadshows on the stock exchanges to people, and I used to tell them, Africa, I have growth. You know, they used to laugh at me and said, Africa, I mean, who's going to afford I think it's 1 billion people, you know, but yeah, but, you know. And now we have 800 million people in Africa with phones, you know, and each businessman, small business in Africa, his desktop, his phone. He's doing the business totally with his phone, you know. Even the farmers now are getting the prices of their crops and everything. So it's just this device has revolutionized the world in terms of business, and as a result, you have these geniuses, as much as democracy too. I think that the phone, I mean, I'm always criticized, for you who want to have a final laugh, I own the only mobile network in North Korea. So don't panic, and I've paid my price for being there, you know. So people tell me, but this is an autocratic system, and how can you be there and getting phones to a dictator like that? Just remember that this is the device of freedom. That's the device of freedom. That's the device that shook Egypt on 25 January, and people started to decide on how to meet and how to demonstrate. And it's the device where you speak up. So it's a freedom. It's a device of freedom, you know. So this is what happened in Africa, you know.
As you said, change from within as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should have a conversation about what parts we want to edit out after from the video.
Nothing.
Awesome.
Hi, Mr. Sawiris. My name is Noor, and I'm a Master of City Planning student here at MIT. So my question is, I feel like a lot of the times, especially in the MENA region, we get stuck in nationalistic lines thinking within the countries. But a lot of the time, as you've seen, especially in the private sector, instability for one country is instability for the region. So what can established businesses and businessmen such as yourself do to
mitigate the risk?
Spread more stability. I mean, investment in unstable countries is a risk, yes, but it's a risk someone has to take. So what do you believe the role of the private sector, especially for the large conglomerates in the region, is for that?
Well, I'm actually not the best one to ask this question to, because I'm the craziest person on earth. I'm investing in North Korea. So you can imagine. And I invested in Iraq during the war. I invested in Syria during an authoritarian regime, and I invested in Algeria when they were slaughtering people, you know, on the streets and so on. So, but it was not out of trying to bring stability or trying to you know, no, it was out of actually greed. Because when you go to very risky places, you have the sky is the limit of the gain you can do, because for the mere reason that nobody wants to go there. So when you go there and you take this step, then you know, it's like if I'm in North Korea, who wants to go to North Korea? But you know, I was still hoping that one day they will come together and I'll be richer even, but it's not happening yet. Every time they meet, I'm praying that they conclude. So to your point is, forget about idealism again, telling people, go on these places because you will spread stability. No, go to these places because you have a lot to win. And at the same time, you're doing something good. You're adding to the stability. But never try to push people on just the nobilism and you know, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no people who do that, you know. But I think you can do both. I always tell people that what our leaders don't understand, that the only way to make our country successful is to put the interest of the individual on the same axis of the interest of the country. So every time he's pushing himself, the country goes forward. Because in the end, everybody's an egoistic in a way or the other. Some people are very egoistic, some people are less. But so don't reinvent. We'll put everything in the same axe, and countries will go like that. And America is a proof of that. America is a proof of that.
So the audience seems to be enjoying this, but how many more questions do you think we have time for?
I'm here till 11, so you can decide.
All right, awesome.
Hi, my name is Amr Khatib. I'm Syrian American. I'm an IT consultant. I have a question. So if you put this aside, the a political factor, the corruption, the bureaucracy, and if you talk only from business perspective, what are the challenges that might face someone who's trying to start up a business in the Middle East all the way to the top?
These are, if you took all this apart, then it's the same challenges in any place. One is that you should never, I mean, that you will get a setback in the beginning, or it's difficult, or it doesn't work. You need to be a person that doesn't take no for an answer. And every time it doesn't work, you need to try again and again, and suddenly you'll see it works. It's just some people stop at the first hurdle, and they don't have the endurance, you know. I mean, my trick was always to tell someone when he tells me it's not doable, it's impossible, you know. Even with my kids, I used to tell them, you know, look, the puppy can do anything. So you need to believe in yourself that you can change. So the challenge that it's not going to work, it's not going to work from the first time. You need to have endurance and make it work. The other challenges you will find is maybe lack of capital in our part of the world, because you don't have the necessary, but you can start small. You don't need to start with a lot of capital, you know. You need to sacrifice if you want, you know. And I actually borrowed from a friend when I started, a small amount of money that I raised too. So, I mean, the lack of capital is another challenge. The perception still in our world, in our areas, that young people are too young, they have no experience, and then you have to tell them about Mark Zuckerberg and all these guys here, you know. So they start, now it's changing, but there's a perception, you know, always that young people, what would they know? They don't have any experience. Other challenges are, I would say, lack of human resources, good trained human resources. I mean, in our country, sometimes you have to work with people who are less qualified than you would have wished for. But they are all challenges that you can overcome, you know. It's just in any kind of country or anywhere. I mean, look at China. The minute they changed their system, look how many billionaires they have now there and so on. One thing which is a very easy do, which you guys should think of, because you are here in the hub of technology. So my son graduated from MIT 3 years ago. So I told him, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go, and I'm thinking I want to go back to Egypt, or I'm thinking to start this venture capital company. So I told him, like, I don't want to push you to do what I did, but why don't you take a good idea that exists here and just go down to our area and do it before it's too late, before someone else does it, and then you create value. Because I remember when I started on the mobile business, my company, my telecom company, people used to come, you're a genius, you thought about this mobile. I said, what genius? Genius? No, I don't think so. I actually saw it happening in Europe. I said, it's going to come to my area anyhow soon. I just ran up to my area and started it on my own, because before the wave would come and all the big guys would come, you know. So I told my son, listen, this Uber thing, it was still brand new. It's the first time I mean, like, we heard of Uber, it wasn't even that. Why don't you just take this same software, go down to Egypt and start an Egyptian Uber and the whole Middle East and Africa. By the time they come here, you built it and you sell it for them like Karim did for 3 billion a week ago. No, he didn't take my advice. And, you know, kids don't like to do exactly like the parents tell them, because they want to find their own way. But what I'm trying to tell you today, there is tons and thousands of these Uber ideas right now happening. Now, you need to be clever enough to think, okay, what does Jordan need out of all these new applications? What's the best application we don't have in Jordan that exists here that would work very well in Jordan, or would work very well in Egypt, would work very well in a destroyed country like Syria, for example? And then you go out with a bunch of friends and you start it up and you replicate it. It's not a crime to replicate a good idea, you know. It's a crime not to replicate it if it's legal, you know. I'm not saying stealing intellectual property, but I mean just doing the idea. You know.
So we should always listen to our parents then.
First rule.
I'm Albert Moussa. I'm part Lebanese, part Egyptian, and now part American as well. Regarding replication...
Which part is speaking now?
Well, you'll find out. Actually, my comment is on what you said on China. I've seen a lot of areas where they took the squatter and they built villages, sometimes the same location, sometimes they moved them, and quite successfully. So my question is, I realize that the cultures are very different in China and Egypt, but what could we learn from the Chinese?
Well, we should not learn that you should move people against their will, because, you know, in China they can do anything. You know, I mean, they can, they have this authoritarian regime, and they will do whatever they think is right. I mean, they're building new islands in the ocean, they're putting sand in the ocean, regardless of what environmental impact it has, and so on. So, what we should not learn from China is enforcement by. But what we should learn is how they rebuilt these in the good examples where people are happy, you know. But if you how they did it, because they move very fast and they build very fast and they are very well organized and so on. That's what we can learn. But we should not copy their authoritarian way of doing things, you know. That's.
Hi, I'm Mohannad. I want to ask you, what do you think the current generation have an advantage over you? Because everything you're saying is like 20, 30 years ago in terms of ideas, but since we're in MIT, the way I look at it, for example, with being connected, setting up companies outside the region and hire from the region, that's something we could do that wasn't available before. But if you look at now, what do you think this is really exciting and it wasn't available to us?
First of all, you guys, you're more free. Like my kids have an immense freedom today. I didn't have that when I was a child. My parents would not grant me the same openness that we can grant today because of the change in life. You know. Second, the connectivity. We didn't have this connectivity. Today you are connected completely to anything, to each other, to knowledge, to other institutions, to the businesses, to the world, you know, so that's another advantage you have. And then three, access to good ideas. Everything today is accessible. They can't hide. I mean, look at how, first there's two main developments that, of course, there are some developments which are not nice. I mean, the anti-social department. You go for dinner with your friends, then you wish you should not have gone for dinner because everybody's on his phone, tweeting to someone else. So why the hell did we all got to have dinner together when everybody's going to sit on his phone? So that's the bad side of things, you know. But in a way, you become independent. You are actually more independent today as an individual than we were. You can depend on yourself. You don't need so much, and you have all the tools. You are well connected, and also you have access to good ideas as much as you want, more than anybody else, you know, with the revolution on the internet and everything, you know. So everything today is better, you know, but one rule remains is you can't be lazy. You can't sit on your back and say, well, I'm unlucky, I didn't get a good idea, I didn't find a good idea. I mean, you need to go out there and look and believe in yourself, you know. This hasn't changed. You have to believe in yourself. I think one more and we go.
Hello, my name is John. I'm from Egypt as well. We talked a lot about that we had, like about the government and leadership, and it seems like there are a lot of ideas, there are a lot of engineering innovation. So that raises the question whether it's a sociological problem or an engineering problem, because now you're fighting against mindset, leadership, government, and people. You're not just fighting against poverty and innovation, because it seems like we already have that.
The problem is we need a leader from MIT, and we need someone who graduates from MIT and suddenly is the president or the king, you know. I mean, no, I'm being honest, anyway. It's a problem is when when your selection of leadership is either a clergyman, a religious clergyman, take Iran, or take the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, or take Iraq, you know, also, or your other option is a military guy. I mean, even in the military, there, you know, and I don't know how the rest of the Arab world is, but in our countries, the military is, you go to the military when you don't score good rates in school. So at the end, you rule over the PhDs and masters, and all these brains you see in this room are ruled by someone who actually rules them because he didn't get good grades in school and then became the leader, you know. So, I mean, unfortunately, until we have this kind of leadership, I don't have any good news to tell you, you know. So, again, the only advice is work within the system to do what you can do within your scope, because you don't want to, as I said, jeopardize your chance. At the same time, have this envision to become a leader. And I'll be the first one to vote for you, you know, once you become, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sawiris, for this, for being very generous with the questions and for this very engaging conversation. So please join me in thanking Mr. Sawiris again.